Hello, team. Welcome back to another Line Warcast. We're on the beta branch today. This is the first video in the series that will have the balance changes for the different units. There's a whole bunch of them. We'll go over them as the game goes on. I'm not even sure what they are exactly off the top of my head, but we got a 1v1 today between Basantos in blue and Romad in red. Basantos spawning in the top right corner. Not sure where Romad's going at the moment. Bottom left. There's like deep reworks to how the economy is going to function in Line War. Territories give you less income by like a little bit. It's not huge or anything, but there are a lot of differences in how the game is going to work. So there's a dock and a refinery with an industry immediately for Basantos, a second industry over here, and Romad's going for 2 docks, in fact 3 docks right away after going for this cross pick. So one of the first territories that Romad actually picked during the picking phase was this water territory so that they could claim this land territory on the bottom left immediately. One of the things that you'll notice potentially is that there's more industries for a single city in this with these changes. So here's the town location. If you build all of your industries, you can turn this into a city. And there used to only be a max of 3 industries that would go along with one cities. And now I believe the max is 5. And so there's actually these 4 farms that Basantos would need to build before building this city. Second dock on the way for Basantos, who puts down a depot, which is a good call because navies take a lot of energy, as we've learned. One of the changes that is in this beta branch, and of course none of this is totally set in stone, so don't take it all for face value, but one of the things is that when energy units like boats, tanks, planes already do this, but when they're in combat and they aren't really moving, they used to not take any, like they used to not spend any energy, but now they spend up to some, like they still spend energy when they're fighting, which is a relatively big change, especially with tanks. So we saw tanks before, if they're just kind of stationary attacking infantry, they wouldn't actually spend any of your energy. Now they do. Changes things a little bit. Basanto's taking a transport boat on the right hand side, going to go across to this island, 4 industries and a town over here, which could set up these trade routes. There's a lot of trade routes in the center of the map. This game will probably take a while to develop in the early game, just because if we zoom out, Romad's in the bottom left, Basantos in the top right. It's going to take a while for both players to meet in the middle here. And I think it's a toss-up as to who has more control of the map and who would get a better economy over time. As mentioned, these land territories actually give you less income now during the game, so they're not that they're less important, but they're, you don't make as much money off of them. There's a 20% increase in all the water territories that can exist on the map, which is not an attempt necessarily, but it will result in navies potentially being more valuable, because we've seen in general to line we're up this till this point that the really the most value you can get is by capturing land territories, which would give you the most eco. So now there's a little bit more incentive to use boats. Basantos is going across on this landmass, so Basantos is going to be in the far right and the central northern location. Romad also has a depot, mirroring essentially what Basantos did to stockpile energy to make sure that these boats can actually move. And no transport boat as of yet for Romad to start capping these left islands or contest this northern island. If Basantos can get stuck in on this northern island, I think that's probably a big strategic bonus. If we zoom out, you can kind of see that I think this is going to be probably relatively important in this game, because it'll really allow Basantos to control this choke on the map. So when I said Romad doesn't have a transport boat, I totally lied. There is actually one at the bottom right. Didn't even notice. So Romad is also on this landmass. You can see that, so this town has 5 industries attached to it. There's technically these little graphical like road thingamajiggies. It's not really a road. And it's not really a thingamajiggy, but this connects all these industries to this town. So you know which industries you need to build in order to build your town. None of them are connected to this town, so this could just be built by itself. It can't be turned into a city. Third dock now for Basantos, who's going to defend against these two destroyers relatively easily. There's already a cruiser out for blue. So it's going to be a great scout for Romad. But it's not like there's going to be a gas snipe anytime soon. Factory on the central island for Basantos. There could be SAMs out of this. There could be artillery pieces to defend these towns and ports and industry. And here's your first fight of the game. Romad knows this isn't a fight that they can take, so they're going to jet out of here with the destroyers. Destroyers are a little bit quicker than cruisers. But of course, destroyers can't actually fight a cruiser at all, really. Especially in equal number fights. Even have the transport boat chasing after this destroyer. And a second transport boat showing up. On the far right, there's no production as of yet. Romad has a sub-pen on the way. And a barracks making commandos. Submarines have a stealth aspect to them. So destroyers, these boats are very good at detecting submarines. If you have enough units around, they will also detect the submarines. But this class of boat has better detection capabilities and better anti-sub capabilities. So we'll see if Basantos decides to make any destroyers, or if it's just going to be a mass of missile boats and cruisers, which is generally what I like to do. But then again, I sometimes get caught with submarines sniping docks and energy, like, and refineries, which this is very important. So Basantos has a full depot of gas saved up at this point. But if this was to get sniped, that's the only refinery that Basantos has at the moment. There's a second one in the north. And Basantos putting down an industry and the town, which will make it so that they have all the industries connected to this town and could upgrade it into a city. Romad nearly has their landmass entirely completed. Building a bunch of boats here, or rather building up a bunch of boats. It's 3 destroyers, a missile ship, and a cruiser. And having 2 destroyers on the left-hand side. If we zoom out with the scroll wheel, which is a little bit... Sometimes janky's not the word, but I find it tough to like scroll out all the way to get the top-down view. But this is a wonderful part of the beta, so that we can see as a caster and as an audience who's capping more of the map and what the kind of general situation is. These 2 transport boats for Basantos are making their way to the central island. Probably going to get shut down relatively quickly just because of how many units that Romad has here. Missile ship for Basantos is going to scout this submarine pen. This is Basantos' view. So it hasn't seen it quite yet, but probably will relatively soon. Second refinery for Romad. And neither player really dealing with gas issues. You can see in the top right the amount of energy that the player has and what they're spending per minute on it by moving all the boats. Or tanks or planes, but there are no airports in this game as of yet. 8 infantry are going to land here for Basantos. It'll be interesting to see what Basantos decides to do when they realize that Romad, like confirm that Romad is on this landmass, and then also that they're outnumbered here. Potentially, maybe even a dig-in or an evacuation. I'm legitimately curious as to what Basantos does in this situation. Small navy for Romad in the north, capping all of this, and it is in fact SAMs out of this factory for Basantos. If Blue decides to take some of these industry and these towns, there's a chance that there could be artillery, because artillery can actually dig in along the coastline and then shell boats that try to attack. And this is the answer for what Basantos is going to do. Basantos is going to put down a barracks and start digging in around this barracks. It's close to the shoreline, so these boats will be able to provide support, especially because there's 4 cruisers. Cruisers have the best range, or the best at fighting land forces from the coast. And this is a thing that we've seen on this series sometimes, where players will build their production facilities very close to the coast and then use the boats to nestle up against the beach and just start shelling the opponent. Town is almost done for Basantos. We can probably do a little bit of an eco check at the moment. 690 for blue and 650 for red, so very close. Romad's response to this landing is an airport. There's 2 missile boats for blue here. So red is going to need quite a few planes to be able to overpower this. And this is the power of cruisers that we see. Shelling these units. Best part about the beta, of course, is that there's a deeper zoom when we're watching. You can see red's infantry digging in there. We go big picture. Romad's got the bottom right of this island. Basantos is making their way down south and also has already built 2 industry and a factory. So blue really going for a lot of eco buildings. I don't think that Romad has any easily accessible eco. I mean, there's a town here, but there's no port connected to it. It'll be interesting to see how the ecos start to play out as time goes on with the investment that blue is making. Basantos going for another factory here. There's enough missile boats that I think that red's airport is going to get shut down. 2 submarines out for Romad. That could make the difference. We can see that this refinery is still relatively undefended. The good thing for blue is that as these boats pop out of these shipyards, they will just naturally kind of defend that refinery. And this is Romad's long-term plan, which is building another factory to try to push this out. It's very important that Romad be able to at least stop blue from advancing probably past this choke. And maybe even further to try to keep this town alive, because this town is connected to this town as well via this port. So if Romad long-term wants to get a trade route up, this will be relatively important. Luckily for red, they have a trade route on the right, or the left-hand side, pardon me. Basantos is reinforcing this with 2 transport boats. Great flank from Romad. The boats are a little bit out of position. It's enough infantry that maybe if they just targeted this factory, they'd be able to kill it. But with the haste move of the boats around the back for blue, I don't think that red's going to be able to kill this factory. Some of these infantry are fighting the other infantry. They're not all targeted on the factory. But we'll see if this factory goes down. It's a relatively big moment in the game, because if these artillery pieces and potentially SAMs out of this factory for blue, they start getting up, it'll become a big problem for Romad. And the last 2 infantry go down. The factory is heavily damaged but will survive. Another barracks on the mainland for blue. And Romad will need to respond. There's helicopters on the way. With this Southern Navy, Romad's probably going to try to push up a little bit at some point, and it's going to turn into a huge naval battle. First artillery piece for blue is out. We've seen how artillery over time, if you get enough of them in a blob, it's very difficult to deal with. Second refinery for blue on the way. There's about 6 SAMs on this northern island. And third refinery for red. It's a relatively heavy Navy game, so energy security really matters to keep the boats moving, especially because this balance patch, as mentioned, when the boats are fighting, even if they are not moving, they are still consuming energy. Basantos energy at 37 of 150, it's spending a lot. Luckily, the second refinery is on the way. We can see that the depot doesn't have as much energy saved up as before. And for Romad, 24 out of 210. So both players managing their energy quite well. It's I think a very, it's an understated, difficult thing to do as a line war player, especially when you're new, is managing how much gas Navy takes. 2 artillery pieces and 2 SAMs for blue in this mountain. In mountain territory, infantry and all units move slower, especially if you don't own the territory. This is a blue-owned territory, so red's infantry moves super slow. They're now on top of the artillery. Infantry can kill artillery relatively quick as long as they're on top of it. I think that blue is going to control this choke, especially with the third artillery piece showing up and a second factory being built. A little bit of a skirmish between this navy and a little bit of a standoff in the middle of the map here. Blue has a lot of cruisers. There's four cruisers for red. If Romad can attack this northernmost part of the navy without Basantos sending all the boats up to defend it, there's a chance that Romad could get a good trade. The very start of this battle is pretty decent for red. More cruisers for red are firing than the blue cruisers. If Basantos backing up, there's an opportunity that if Romad wanted to go super hard here, they could just gun to this gas and try to destroy it. One of the best ways to beat an opponent in a navy game is just destroy their gas and then use the mobility of your boats to slowly end the game and destroy the targets that you need to. Like, this industry is close to the water. These two could also be hit. You get the idea. If your opponent can't move their boats and you can, that's a huge advantage that you have. We got two naval fights going on, one in the south and one in the north. Romad subs and 2 destroyers and a missile boat taking on 2 cruisers and just 2 cruisers now since that missile boat got killed. Relatively large army for blue that's pushing up on Romad's main base. The helicopters will be able to defend it. There's no SAMs out of this factory. And Basantos loses this battle in the bottom of the map. So there's going to be no blue missile ships that can show up on the southern part of the map, but there could be on the north. If Basantos could get some missile ships here, they could deal with these helicopters and strikers. The one problem, of course, being Romad's navy. Romad has a bunch of boats parked on this refinery to try to deal with any submarines or run-bys that happen. And we can see the plan, Basantos, pardon me, building this town. And I think, so this town doesn't actually have any industry attached to it, so it can't turn into a city. This is the city location. But it's still more economy for blue. This is a rush forward from blue on top of these producers. You can see that these infantry are sprinting. There's a lot of infantry and artillery for red. This is Romad, or Basantos' view. Another submarine pops out for Romad, who is going for a big push around the north. The submarines can attack the land as of yet, but they'll be able to deal with these boats as they show up. I don't think Basantos can see all of these submarines. We can see that they're kind of popping in and out of vision. As these blue boats get closer to these submarines, they will be detected. And Romad might actually get a factor here, which is a relatively big deal. Bomber, the first bomber for Romad. Bombers have been given a buff. A lot of artillery for Basantos, who will probably win this right-hand side of the map, and that's a relatively big deal. But bombers now fly as fast as interceptors. Again, these changes aren't set in stone, so it might change, but there is... Too long didn't read is that interceptors and bombers were buffed a little bit. Factory is replaced by Basantos, who will lose this barracks. So great naval run by red. And still no real economic development from red on the left side of the map. 4th refinery from Romad, putting themselves in position to build this trade route. And here comes Blue's first airport. So Romad's going to wreak havoc with a lot of these boats. It's 3 destroyers and 3 cruisers and a missile boat, so it's a relatively strong navy. We'll see if Basantos decides to move to the north to attack this, or maybe even just push forward. I think either one could work. But this farm will get taken out, potentially the second farm. And now the airplanes are here. Bombers cannot be attacked by SAMs. The machine gun, we'll see like the firecracker go off, that it's attacking the helicopter. The machine gun of a SAM can't hit a bomber, only the missile, which is a reason why bombers decent against SAMs. The targeting of bombers was also buffed. They drop more of their payload, and they will target SAMs more often. Helicopter goes down, beta animations look absolutely fantastic. And with all these commandos, I'm not sure, Basantos can see all of them because of these producers and all these units. When this factory goes down, I think a lot of, or some of these commandos might disappear from view. We're on Basantos' view right now to kind of showcase the stealth of the commando. Yeah, see, the second commando does disappear from view. Blue boats will be able to take out some of this. I mean, it's only one cruiser against two cruisers in the north for red. Basantos kind of going for a probing play with this navy. It's a lot of boats at home to defend this gas. But the gas for red is relatively low. You can see these refineries are all actually pumping out gas. You can tell because of this black smoke out of the stack there. Fourth dock now for Basantos, who doesn't want to fall behind on the navy. It's a good play. It is a dive on top of the refinery. This one might actually go down. The cruisers pack quite a punch. But good defense from red on that refinery. Income check 972 for Basantos, 840 for Romad. I think the difference is how much industry that blue is building. Has nearly all of these ones on the right-hand side, with the exception of these two lumber mills and this one farm. But this many artillery, I think, can destroy that much infantry unless they jump on the artillery right now, like when they're not sieged. A lot of naval action. Let's take a deeper look. So most of the territory has been captured. You can kind of see this split going on. A lot of Navy territory to note in this beta. And just some skirmishes, but I don't think either player's at risk of losing super important infrastructure like any gases. This refinery for red is repairing itself. Two cruisers from Romad showing up over here to check if this town is taken. Red's energy going down at like a relatively rapid pace. But there's no more refineries for red to... I mean, I guess there's these ones, but they're a little bit more exposed. This one probably relatively safe. This one a little bit more exposed. Artillery can take on boats. So I think that Romad will destroy these two barracks over time, as long as they keep these artillery closer to the coast to shell the boats and give cover for the infantry and commandos that are pushing. Here comes the play from Romad, who is running dangerously low on energy. So if these boats run out of energy when they hit this Black Plume Bespoke, they take more damage for the next 5 seconds. I think it's 50% more damage, but there are a lot of red ships here, so as long as these boats can get close enough to kind of park here and attack, they still will attack even if they're out of energy, but they'll potentially take more damage. Basantos is rushing back to try to defend this refinery. That's very important for blue. So as a result, red is going to be able to push back these two barracks. This is a big moment in the game. If Romad could destroy this blue navy, destroy this energy, and all 4 docks, it would just be a matter of time, I think, until blue was to lose the game because of how important navy control is here. You can count for yourself. Blue is outnumbered on the cruisers, which is a big deal. These cruisers do the most damage in a pound-for-pound fight against other Navy units. Refinery does go down. I think blue is going to be able to defend here without losing any of the docks. And rebuilding that refinery immediately because it is quite important. Second airport now for Basantos. who has a bunch of SAMs to defend this position and going for bombers. And for those in the know, Basantos develops line war alongside Infenzia. And for those not in the know, now you know. Clean up from blue on that red navy. And the bottom, a lot of artillery pieces. Romad's not going to be able to take this right-hand side of the map. But they have taken this top left island, so they could start working on this trade route. And income-wise, 900 for red, 1042 for blue. And a good mix of units out of this airport for Romad. Depot is full of energy. Four docks are still pumping out boats. And with this part of the map kind of going in blue's favor so heavily, and Romad, unless Romad starts moving a bunch of transport boats across or has sort of like air support to deal with this, it's not likely that Romad's going to try to make a play there. I think that the game is about to turn into a focus on this northern island in the center here. This cruiser might be able to hit this mining site, but clearly it can't really. 2 cruisers and a missile boat are going to be able to destroy probably all 3 of these destroyers just because they're so low on health. Blue cruiser kind of helping out, but it won't be enough. So it is 2 airports going bombers. These will have the range to attack everything on Romad's kind of main base. And includes this town in the north. I think these bombers could probably hit it. Yeah, they can. So if we hit tab, we can see the ranges. This airport just in range of that town if it were to exist. And the bombers are going out. We're not really sure where they are going at the moment. They might be targeting this refinery, which is a great call, but Romad is in position. There's 2 missile boats as part of this. So 2 missile boats against 3 bombers, pardon me. None of the other boats can kind of help out, so it really is just 2 missile boats shooting SAMs at the bombers. The bombers will go home. And all 3 of them will survive. City on the way for blue, which will further extend the economic lead. And a town on the far right side being built. Income-wise, 1025 for blue, 910 for red. And Romad may need to at least deal with this right-hand side of the map or start building their own economy in order to keep up. These bombers are going to be able to defend all of these units because there's only 1 missile ship. And the bombers will attack it first, so the first missile boat goes down. Blue Navy showing up to box in all these cruisers and destroyers for red. This will be relatively expensive. And blue puts down a town in response to this. Eco generally being a great thing to build when you destroy your opponent's army, when you think you have enough producers. Best way to make more money is to invest in making more money, and if you're ahead of your opponent on unit count, you're safe to do this. This many boats and the bombers, potentially Romad actually is able to snipe this town because it's just being built. If these 3 boats all target this, I think that is what's going to happen. Here comes Romad's counterplay, but all of these SAMs are dug into the mountain. To be fair, I don't think Romad would have seen this until the planes were directly over top of it. Good snipe on the town by red. And starting to kind of blockade this far right island. Northern Navy for red does get cleaned up. And still just 4 docks, rather 5 docks now for Romad. So yeah, the SAMs don't shoot their machine guns, but when there's this many, they will destroy the bombers relatively quick. And new animations in beta looking fantastic. Another run by from Red on this dock. There's submarines along with it. Luckily for Blue, 2 missile boats pop out in time to try to defend this. There's 2 cruisers here for Blue, so I think this is going to get stuffed. Unfortunately for Romad. And Basantos is probably relatively close to building these industries on the far right-hand side of the map. Submarines are actually doing work for Red. Maybe the refinery could go down if all these boats targeted it. But otherwise, with these reinforcing Blue boats, there's no way this is going to work, or at the very least, this entire Red Navy is going to be cleaned up. Basantos has enough energy, so it's not like this refinery is immediately important, except for how much it costs to rebuild it. And here come the bombers from Basantos. Not really sure exactly where they're going. There's a hotkey in the replay for turning on the line commands, but I've forgotten what it is, and I'll learn it for next game, so that we could be able to tell where these are going. But they are actually circling the top left, which makes a lot of sense. Blue wants to check if there's any trade route or any town being produced. Unluckily for Red, that transport boat does get taken out. There's not a lot of land forces on this starting island for Basantos, so if Red could get some amount of units on here, boats won't be able to defend it. The bombers would be really the only thing that could do anything against the landing party. And a mix of bombers and helicopters circling over this central island. And with this backstab, Romad might actually be able to destroy this refinery. It's great defense from Blue, and like we said earlier, when the docks are this close to the refinery, they kind of naturally defend it just by you producing boats. A lot of defensive units for Blue here. And the Red boats are no longer targeting that refinery, so it's going to stay alive. And more importantly, we get our first look at the aircraft carrier. So Romad's got an aircraft carrier. 2 planes can land on this that are not bombers or transport planes. So strikers and interceptors. And I think helicopters, but not even quite sure. And that aircraft carrier can move anywhere it wants, and the range of the strikers will be the same as if it's an airport. So it's really just like a moving airstrip that can take 2 planes on it instead of 5. Great landing from these commandos. Basantos can see all of this. This is Basantos' view, so because of all these buildings and units, nothing is entirely, concealed. And good reaction time from Blue to send those bombers out relatively quick. There's now a lot of boats in the bottom for Basantos, who has built this port and has another dock here building only transport boats. So we can see what the play is that Blue is going to try to land across this little channel. Interceptors on the aircraft carrier, which is retreating because of this enormous amount of boats. And Romad's going for something. It might be a reinforcement of that landing. Or maybe even just a longer trip to Basantos' main island. 1 missile boat attacking these Blue bombers with SAMs, but after that 4th bomber gets by, and potentially even the 5th bomber, missile boat is going to be destroyed. The beep beep we hear is Basantos being low on gas. Low on energy, using a lot per minute because of how expensive boats are to move, and just energy units in general. Still no transport boat, or trade route from Romad in the top left. There's now a landing with SAMs, which is really good for Romad, so that they can kind of chip away at these bombers. Really, the best thing against bombers is going to be interceptors. SAMs being the SAMs and missile boats being the next best thing. But unescorted bombers will get ripped to shred by a decent amount of interceptors. This artillery on the high ground in the mountains is going to be really clutch for blue. They're going to constantly shell these red units, and they're not really going to take any damage themselves. Basanto's trying to re-land here, so this is starting in earnest. A lot of SAMs and artillery and a good enough amount of boats for blue to cover that landing. And what Roman has going for them is that Basantos is low on gas. 2 submarines, these are blue submarines, Subpen in the north. And this is Basantos's play to get more energy, is building that refinery in the top left. Romad definitely needs to hold on here and not let Basantos reestablish a foothold, because blue has a superior economy, and if they were able to do that, then Basantos can just put a bunch of money into this part of the map. So this is Basantos' view. 4 of these commandos are exposed. The rest and the infantry piece, or the artillery piece, which is in the mountains, can't be seen. Mountains give a little bit of a stealth bonus. 1302 income for blue and 985 for red. We can take a top-down look. Landing attempt still going over. Basantos is also landing in the bottom left in this, or bottom right, pardon me, in this little island. The artillery pieces are in a lot of trouble. The second they land, they're greeted by 4 pre-deployed artillery. Luckily for blue, these 2 red artillery pieces move forward, so they unsiege for a little bit to get closer and actually start attacking. Good snipe from Romad on Basantos' refinery in the top left, which does go down. If all of these commandos could snipe this town, the mine, and then these 2 airports, maybe blue is in a better position. You can see that Basantos is a little bit worried just because they're putting down another barracks on this landmass, but also going for this town at the top, so it's not like there's a lot of pressure there. Second city for blue, that is enormous. It'll be very difficult for red to punish this. The only thing that really can is this navy in the south. But they'll have to get all the way up here. By that time, Basantos will be able to see this with all these spotting boats. Good snipe from Romad on that town. C4 on these 2 docks. So blue is doing this so that they don't have to pay the upkeep cost of having those buildings. So that might mean that Basantos is looking to get more money or to reinvest it somewhere closer to the front. Great commando drop. It's going to be able to destroy this airport. Infantry is better in the forests in this balance patch than they were on the main branch. These 2 factories also getting C4 to free up some more economy. So infantry used to have I believe it was a 10% buff to their defense and their attack in forests. They now have a 20% buff to both their attack and defense in the forests. And like I said, there's a whole bunch of changes that I'm not even mentioning here. And if you'd like to learn more, you can check out the Line War Discord, which has the full list. There's a lot of transport boats. Yeah, and so this is the play. I mean, Basantos is really just replacing these 2 factories on the right-hand side with these 2 on Romad's landmass. Romad is making a good attempt to get this northern island. As mentioned, if red could actually take this entire thing, it could change the game a little bit, including these trade routes on the left-hand side. So Romad's getting the first town. That's huge. But Romad will need to do that, set up that trade route, and have a major win on this northern island while also not dying to this blue push. Basantos' boats are a tad bit out of position in the north, and they're out of gas, so they won't be able to move. Romad, on the other hand, has tons of gas. I mean, they're burning through a bunch of energy since these boats are hasted. But if Blue's boats keep getting stuck, then maybe Romad has a shot to destroy this refinery. I mean, they already destroyed this one in the top left. And if they can destroy this refinery, they might be able to kill these 2 docks and potentially the whole navy of Blue. 3 artillery pieces for Red here are a big deal. This is really the only part of the map that matters at the moment. The refinery for Blue will go down. None of these bombers can fly to defend this northern island. And this is I can't imagine this is anything short of super frustrating for Blue, because there's enough boats to defend this, but they can't move, and they're also taking extra damage over time because of being out of gas. Romad still has enough gas for a little bit. I mean, they're running out, but they're not totally out yet. And it is just enough boats for Blue here. Another destroyer pops out. As mentioned, even if the boats are out of gas, they will continue to fight. Worst case for Blue, 1 more dock goes down. Even worst case for Blue is that this city goes down, but it's great dug-in artillery for Basantos. The port does go down. It'll take longer to destroy this city, especially with all these artillery pieces shelling this navy. 2 more sub-pens in the top north for Basantos, who does stabilize and rebuilds this refinery immediately. There's no more airports on this northern island. Romad's making their way even further north, closer to that refinery with some commandos. And the boats are taking a lot of damage, but I think the city takes more damage. And there you go. Great snipe by Romad, who's... I'm not sure if it could be considered a comeback just because of how many factories that Basantos is putting down on this main island, and even building this gas, building another town. Basantos clearly not too worried about losing all this economy, just rebuilding it immediately. 980 income for Red, 1292 for Blue. And these submarines could be huge to destroy any transport or like merchant ships that show up in that trade route if they do. Another barracks for Basantos to start reclaiming that northern island. But the bottom right is still super good for Blue. Great commando drop from Romad using the old BBD. The Basantos base drop, the big Basantos drop, whatever you want to say. We've seen it on this series before, where you drop commandos directly on the high value targets, which in this case are these 2 factories. Unluckily for Red, there are actually 2 artillery pieces that are going to be able to defend a little bit, but I think even so they should get destroyed. Like, these factories will get destroyed. But maybe we're wrong. Big push from Blue, who may take out this airstrip. We call it the BBD, the big Basantos drop, because we saw a long time ago Basantos make this play against Infense, where they dropped commandos directly on an airport, and for whatever reason that was the first time I'd ever seen it, at least we'd ever seen it as a community. 1 factory goes down. It's a very strong play. If you see a high value target of your opponent while playing ladder, maybe try it. Some transport planes and some commandos. The more transport planes you send out at, obviously the better, the higher damage output. You'll be surprised at how quickly commandos can destroy a building if they land like directly on top of it. Another run by from Romad. I think Red sensed that there was a lot of success when Blue ran into gas problems. The one problem for Red is that there's now another refinery anyway. Because gas-wise, Blue has some gas. Red is actually lower on gas. This navy is going to get cleaned up. We gotta check the economy. 940 for Red, 1280 for Blue. 5 submarines now. Romad's still attempting to land in the north, which I think is the right play. It's tough because Romad can't really sit back and just build this trade route easily, especially with all these subs. It's probably better that Romad doesn't build this trade route. if they know about these submarines. Here comes 4 more commandos. They will get the factory this time and then probably head north to try to destroy that town. 2 cruisers on the far right for Romad, maybe waiting for the opportune time to run in. This refinery actually does go down, so props to Romad for destroying that again. I didn't think that would be possible. And Romad has reclaimed this little bottom right island. Transport planes try to get out, and they will. Lucky for them. And this may be the last moment in the game. If all these red boats can't destroy this refinery again, the submarines are now defending this refinery. Romad doesn't really have enough boats left. There's another aircraft carrier on the way. It looks fantastic. 1399, I don't even know what I read. Income for blue and 930 for Romad. Romad making it a little bit better after sniping that down. But unless blue is out of gas, both players very low on energy. But it's not like red has more boats than blue in like absurd numbers, so they're not going to be able to roll this over. I think at this point, Basantos just stabilizes. 4 commandos could destroy these 2 subpens if Basantos doesn't see it or isn't careful. This is Basantos' view though, so they definitely can see all those commandos. Pipeline goes down again. Town is being rebuilt. And this push is actually looking scarier as time goes on. So Basantos might leave some of these artillery pieces on this town just to protect from commando drops again, because there could be more. Transport planes were still alive, but this is a lot of artillery now for blue that can start pushing. Great positioning from the Red Navy to destroy this one shipyard, and then potentially the boats would run out of there or just stay and fight. I mean, Basantos is starting to corner them. Both players have some gas to work with. Obviously, the money for blue is much higher. And I don't think there's any backstabbing going on in the map. We can look. Nothing yet. Romad's got this town in the bottom. And red might be able to destroy one more farm, and they do. But at the cost of losing this entire navy, because they're now boxed in. There's only one more dock left for Basantos. So if maybe magically Romad won this fight, then they could continue to push. But I mean, this kind of indicates what's going on. Basantos builds this farm immediately. It's actually kind of a cool play because it also it cements the fact that this red navy is going to lose, because these cruisers and missile boats started attacking this farm instead of these blue boats. And now it's just a very, very tough situation for Romad. Maybe if they landed over here, but there's a good amount of artillery that's defending that town. And Basantos now has the boat advantage, so they could get aggressive and start pushing forward. There's a lot of submarines starting to recap a bunch of this water territory. It was one heck of a game. Well played to both of them. Let's check out some graphs. You know we love graphs on this channel. Very close. Energy-wise, you can see both players having the low points. GG. Of course, again, this is the development build. This is the beta. I'm not sure when the video releases or what the status is and if there's any more changes. But I hope you have a wonderful night, day, evening, whatever it is. We'll see you around. Peace.